Hey Poker and Poker Static, welcome to episode 2. We're talking with Barry about some broader topic poker questions to get his thoughts on just the larger community and where it's going. Barry, how have things been going for you?
I guess okay, but not great. I've had a pretty tough year. It seems like I bubble every tournament, and I used to laugh at people who would tell me how they get aces or beat all in, because typically people who are saying that to you, it's because they're playing too tight and they're playing a strategy that's just not going to work. They're sitting around waiting for good hands. They bleed their chips off when they get the good hand. If it holds up, they double back up to their starting stack or something similar to that. And eventually that good hand's going to get beat. So a lot of books on tournaments were pretty bad. The books that I've seen, I haven't read a lot of poker books actually, that they give what I always just call the negative strategy of sitting around waiting, surviving, which would never allow you to get your chips built up. And a better strategy used to be to go after it, get chips built up. So if you ever did get this bad hand, you had the guy out chipped and you could carry on and go further. So I'm not playing that tight in these tournaments, I'm winning money until this hand. And actually, the funny thing is, although I've had my worst year in tournaments, I haven't even run that bad. It's almost like I've run good at the beginning. I've often gotten in with a race or the worst hand and won early, and it's almost like it's been the perfect recipe for torture, where I've lasted to the third or fourth day, and then I get the aces all in beat in a big pot that'll, if I'd have won it, will get me through to the final table. So it's not that I'm sitting there waiting. I'm making money until this big hand comes up. And actually, overall, if it were cash games, I'd be way ahead. I mean, because I've won lots of bets, but I've won my bets at the lower levels. Now, there's another thing you have to realize when you're playing at those first levels. The field's weaker. You have players that are more exploitable. The weaker players often get knocked out the first day. So there are other reasons that you can say, well, I'm beating the weaker players and I'm losing to the stronger players, and there's there's probably some truth to that also. And it's not like I'm playing flawlessly or anything. Every tournament, since I'm going very deep in these tournaments, I'm certainly making mistakes and making plays that I regret. So as a poker player, I often feel like I've only got myself to blame, even though the final hand may have been something that was beyond my control and that I played correctly.
Do you feel like the general field of players is significantly or noticeably tougher than it was last year?
I think it is, and part of that is the economy means that we have less loose money, especially on the West Coast. You'll normally get like 7 people you don't know, and or that you do know, and 2 people you don't know. That are presumably weaker, although if they're young kids, that doesn't mean they are. That means they just may have not come into the live scene. So, yeah, it has gotten tougher. What we always find is if the field is big, there's going to be enough weak spots that it's a good tournament. And one of the ways you make a field big is by having satellite entries, whether they're live satellite entries or, I think it's promising that we got this NAPT, where PokerStars feeding people off the site that have come in from low-buy-in satellites. They haven't put out one of the problems, and people are complaining about, is it almost feels like PokerStars has dropped the ball on these tournaments. We had a couple good tournaments. At the Venetian was one, and then it got canned because of the question of whether online sites should be in brick-and-mortar casinos in Las Vegas. They had to cancel that tournament. Hopefully, when the UIGA gets overturned, which we've been waiting for 4 years, we'll go back to feeding the tournaments this way from online satellites. That tournament was a great success, and the one at Mohegan Sun was a great success, but they haven't put out enough of them. So now we're back to the WPT, which a lot of times is tougher because they're not being fed by satellites. We have some of these circuit events that the WSOP is trying to push. Went to the regional one in Chicago. It was an okay tournament, 200 some people, but normally when you get these fields for a 10K that are 200 to 300, then it's going to be a lot of the same faces. And it's not until you get in the numbers over 500 that you say, just by numbers, you get a field that big, it's going to be a good tournament.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, my mom just came home. Let me say, hi Mom, I'm talking to Barry really quick.
Okay.
Sorry about that, guys. I had to pause the recording for a second to let Barry catch up with my mom. It's very cute.
You have to, let me give some advice. This is important.
Uh-huh.
You want to get in good with the mother, okay? You know, going after the daughter, that's one way you go, but to get the mother to like you, then, you know, that's a better way to solve the problem.
That is some good advice. I agree with that.
Okay.
So getting back to the subject, is PokerStars going to be having more NAPT events next year? What's going on with that?
Well, we do have, I've talked to one of the guys who's the main guy for these tournaments. His name, I guess I can say it, is Joe Versace. And sounds like Versace clothes. But he's North American liaison to the PokerStars team. And so he had told me about certain plans they have for different venues. But one of the things that's going on with all these different PokerStars projects, and that's not only the NAPT, but the big game show and even the $1 Million Challenge show, is they are greatly impacted by whether the UIEGA gets removed and that we have legalized poker in the United States. Of course, what's going to happen if we get these new laws, which we feel will happen? It's just, again, when. And we're certainly assuming almost at this point that it's going to happen in 2011. I know I said in 2006, I said it was going to happen in 2007, so Congress moves slow. We don't always get what we want.
It does. But it moves very slow.
But if it does happen, the way these laws are going to be written is that these companies are going to have to be housed in the United States and regulated in the United States. We're going to see a big exodus from, in PokerStars' case, Isle of Man in London, and in the case of other websites from wherever they are. And we'll also see probably new ones cropping up, and they'll be moving to the United States. We suspect Nevada will be a state that will be housing some of these companies. But it's going to change advertising. The amount of advertising we'll be able to do. We'll probably see a second poker boom, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
It will have a connection between the online sites and the brick and mortar casinos. So it is going to drastically change poker. Now, one thing that's getting in the way of that is the economic downturn. We don't seem to have as much recreational money coming into the poker market as we've had in the past. I've seen that in a couple ways before my life. In 1974 through 76, there was a kind of a recession, especially for farmers. And I lived in Illinois, and I played in a game that had several farmers there. So the money dried up in that area at the time. We just didn't have a lot of good poker games. But there were other places. I actually had to, in the late 70s, go to Houston. The games were booming there, where they were doing a lot of building. And then, they stopped building in Houston. There were problems there, and the games moved to other places. So I've seen situations before in my lifetime where it looked like poker was drying up, but it was thriving in other places. As we've heard recently, even though poker was having some problems here, there were some big games going in Macau. And there are always big games going on around the world privately that will have a couple catalysts driving the game. You can't always get into those games. But that has been the case for my 40-so years of playing poker, that there are good spots if you can find them and you can get into them. But, you can't always get in. There's more playing poker than just winning money in poker than just playing. Sometimes you have to have the connections, and you have to be someone who people like playing with for whatever reason, whether you're fun to play with, to be around, they enjoy your company, whatever it is. often networked, and so there are good games around, but there aren't probably as many because the economy's down.
Right. And in terms of the probability of poker becoming legalized, there's a lot of talk that it looks very good. If you were to give it a percentage range, what would you give it?
I think it's close to 100%. It's just the question is when. Even the opponents, because I've had to meet with some people who opposed legalized online poker, and even they're saying to us, okay, we know what's going to happen, but we want to structure how it happens. For instance, whether you can use credit cards to fund your online account, or whether you can use debit cards only so people aren't getting into credit problems playing online poker, or whether there will be restrictions on the amount of money someone can put on per week or whatever to protect the consumer that way. So even the opponents at this point, for the most part, assume it's going to happen. It's just a question, what the protections, as they call them, are in the bill. We always hear these things about protections against possible compulsive gamblers, protections against underage gamblers. It ends up that those really aren't big problems from what the studies have shown, but there are problems from an anecdotal point of view that they'll name one case of some guy losing money online poker and going in to rob a bank. Mm-hmm. And it's not like, people rob banks and people commit crimes for money all the time. And that doesn't mean it's because they lost money playing online poker. Just because anecdotally someone did it, one case where it was related to a poker loss, doesn't mean that's a problem.
I know what you're talking about, and this isn't really related to poker loss, but I had somebody come up to me and ask, what do you think about that poker player murdering those people? And I was like, what is it having to do with me or the poker community? It's just, a small sample size.
Yeah, but people hear that and they react to it, and it's not a big problem. We actually don't have a big problem with compulsive gambling or underage gambling. As I always say when I talk to people, if we're having a problem with some 14-year-old using his parents' credit cards for online poker, I think we really have a parenting problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My 14-year-olds weren't getting hold of my credit cards and running up bills on them, and having nothing to do with poker. I think there'd be more danger of them using it to go on eBay and buy something there than there would be on a poker site, actually.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you think, even if it does get legalized next year, how long would it take for something like that to actually go into effect?
Well, again, I don't know how slow the process will be. There will be a bill passed legalizing online poker. We still don't know if it's going to be a poker-only bill. There'll be other types of gambling in the bill also. It could go either way. That's what's not clear. There are a couple different levels. We pretty much know it's not going to involve sports betting because there's a big lobby against it.
Mm-hmm.
It may involve other casino games, but some people don't like that. And then there was Senator Menendez. His proposal was peer-to-peer games. So it's where you're not playing against the house. Those types of games would be legal. Things like backgammon, chess, poker. You're playing against other people. Those would be legal. That was his bill. Or it may just be a poker bill. We don't know for sure what it's going to be. But once it does happen, then the next thing is going to be licensing companies. And of course, you're going to see a big scramble to get licensed by companies like PokerStars and by some of the brick and mortar casinos, whether they'll be teaming up with the current online brands or striking out in their own direction. We don't know that either at this point. Mm-hmm. So we don't know exactly what shape it's all going to take and who's going to get licensed.
Right. In terms of that whole peer-to-peer concept, if something like that were to pass, would people eventually be able to play chess and checkers for money?
Those games usually don't work out that well for money, so whether you could or not.
Mm-hmm.
It'd probably be for certain fees, more like a fantasy thing. We see it in bridge all the time. People they pay money to play in tournaments, but they're playing for master points.
Mm-hmm.
And in chess, you play for ratings. You do have chess tournaments, and there's money. We would probably get chess tournaments between top players where there are championships and there is money for involved. But chess ends up not being a good campaign generally because there's so much more skill than luck. There is actually some luck in chess, and they're playing against different people with different strategies that might work better for your game than theirs. But it's not like poker where, and that's why poker ends up being a better, gambling game, because on any hand anyone can beat anyone else,
mm-hmm.
And that luck factor. Even though the better player, the more skillful player is going to have the advantage, the less skillful player still has a chance to win. And you need that ingredient for a game to be successful and for it to get a wide audience.
Mm-hmm. I'll just say when instead of if now, since it's looking so good. I'll just say when it becomes legalized.
It is gonna happen.
Yeah. Is it gonna bring a lot of unwanted competition for the brick and mortar companies or casinos?
Well, it's not clear. Will it bring a lot of people into poker? The answer to that is yes.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people will play poker, and nowadays a lot of people will start their poker online. With it being legal, it actually is legal to play online in most states now anyway. But most people here, it's illegal. It's illegal to run a company from the United States. It's not illegal for me or you in the states we live in to play poker online. But it's difficult. They've made it difficult with this UIGA because they've made it difficult for people to get money on the site. So when that changes, and when it's clearly, even a lot of people think it's a gray area, whether they can play online. It's not a gray area. It's clearly legalized. We'll have a lot of people playing regularly.
Mm-hmm.
That will, obviously, I assume that'll create some sort of second poker boom. And then how that will affect the brick and mortar casinos. Some of them will get in on the action online. They'll have a brick and mortar presence for their online site. But also, I think it will help them where it'll just take people who learn to play poker online, but they'll like the social atmosphere you get from the playing live, and there, and we'll see that. I think we will see a big increase. We saw this before the UIGA in pre-2006, like 2003 to 2006. We had a big increase in television with the hole cards. We saw increase in those shows. We saw the increase online, and then we had people coming into the brick and mortar casinos playing poker, and the places were packed for a number of years. Poker just went through the roof, where they often didn't have enough tables in a lot of established casinos. And now we have the UIGA. We also had the economic downturn, and I go into the commerce where I call in those things while I'm in town, and it's looking like a ghost town.
It is. I mean, everybody talks about what a ghost town it is, and I'm talking to all the supervisors and stuff like that, and they just are in disbelief about how empty it is.
So there is no question for their business legalizing online poker and regulating it. That, accompanied with a better economic outlook, will bring games back there.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true, because if you just get more people into poker in general, then it's going to spill over into the brick and mortars, even if they start playing online, or even if they play online for the most part.
Yeah, I think we saw the commerce objecting to the law, and they were feeling threatened by online poker, because right now, with these factors that we're talking about, their business is down. And when you don't have a certain critical mass for games, what happens is people come in or they call in, a game hasn't started, and there's no doubt that in some cases, because I've done it myself, if there's nothing going on at the brick and mortar clubs, I'm better playing live poker than I am online. But if there's nothing going on, well, I may stay home and play online. Poker stars will have a nightly tournament or play the Sunday tournaments or whatever, or play some cash games online. So what we have when you don't have that critical mass of players going into the brick and mortar casino, people will stay home and play online. And I think that's what the commerce casino is misunderstanding. They're saying, hey, we know some of these people are at home playing online. It's hurt our business. But I think overall, once we get these other factors, the legalization plus the economy problem solved, or it's better than it is now, we're really in a bad state, but coming out of it. But once we get that solved, they'll then see that online poker is actually helping them. And not only will it help them because it will create a lot of new players, but it will feed their tournaments also, which will again introduce people to their casino. And some of those people will repeat the tournament.
Mm-hmm. And getting away from casino talk, and I want to bring the attention to more of, I guess, the pop culture or the image of pokers or poker players. How do you feel like our community image is different now compared to, say, decades ago?
What was the word you used? As opposed to when? Oh, you broke up.
Whenever ago.
Did you say decades ago, or what?
We'll say 5 or 10 years ago. How about that?
I don't know if it's changed in the last 5 or 10 years. We had a pretty good image about 5 or 10 years ago, or 5 years ago when the main poker boom was. It got accepted as entertainment, as sport. It had a pretty positive image. I think the only negative thing we're getting, and we have this not only in America but in other countries, is the danger of some of the intelligent young people, mostly young men, spending too much time playing poker or video games, maybe it was before that, or even in my day, it was pinball games. People just hanging out playing pinball and not, doing things they should do, or not getting on with their studies. There's always going to be distractions. And poker is a distraction for intelligent young people, and sometimes they carry it too far.
Right.
And so that's why we see, some of the other countries saying, we don't want legalized poker because we have some of our young people spending too much time doing it. And they're undoubtedly right that people don't do it in moderation. Most of my message when I talk to young people is, you're probably playing too much poker. Don't make that everything in your life. You've got to have other things you do, whether it's sports, which is always something I recommend for young people because it keeps you healthy. It's a healthy way to compete. Or other interests, whether it's academic interests or business interests. You need to be well-rounded. And so we do have people who obsess with poker, and even if they don't, I don't want to say they're compulsive gamblers, but that's just not a good way to run your business. So that's just a problem. It's been a problem for probably thousands of years that people don't diversify well enough.
I do get the impression from even some of the more successful players, if they spent too much of their focus on poker and don't think about other things, then they end up not being very happy, even though they have tons of money.
Yeah, we're going to find the people who have money, a lot of times it can fool you while you're making money and you're driven to do that. But there's just more to life. There are more things to accomplish in life than making money. And money's a good thing to have, but you should be using that money, if you're someone who's successful, to now go on to other things that will fulfill you. And so, we're seeing, and we will see, because it's still young with this online poker boom that we've had, we're going to have people get to 30 years old, and the ones who made money, we're going to be saying, I wish I'd stayed in school, I wish I'd had other interests. And the ones who dropped out of school and were not successful are going to say, what did I do with my life? I'm now 30 years old, and it's kind of hard for me to go back to school. It's kind of hard for me to get another trade. because I put everything into poker. So both of those groups are going to feel unfulfilled, and some of them are already feeling it. You know, I have a lot of people who say to me when they're 19 years old that I'm wrong and they disagree with me. But I have very few people when they hit 30 years old come back and say that I was wrong.
Mm-hmm. So whenever somebody is young and they go up to you and they ask you whether they should, you know, drop out of school to pursue poker or stuff like that, you would pretty much tell them to stay in school.
Well, a lot of times what's wrong is they're doing stuff in school that they're not enjoying. And they enjoy poker more, and I totally understand that. They've got to get into something that they really are interested in. Going to school for the sake of going to school, there is some value in that, which I'll get to, which a lot of people are missing. I actually wasn't a very, you know, I did well in school because I was kind of academically, but I wasn't what I would call studious. I didn't do homework, actually. I didn't like stuff like that. I kind of enjoyed taking tests because I'm kind of competitive, and I enjoyed learning, which was a key thing for me. But what I got out of school, and what you should get out of school, and hopefully, you and I, you know, I knew you before you were 21 years old. Did I? Actually, I didn't know you were 21 because the first time I met you was at the Bellagio. So if you played at the Bellagio, you must have been 21 years old. But whatever, you were still in school. Growing up, school is a really great place to grow up, and university is really a place that I recommend growing up. Strip clubs in Las Vegas, that's not a place I recommend growing up. And so, you know, what I got out of school and what I hope my children got out of going to college is hanging around with a peer group. You're going to find people who have like interest to yourself at school, and hopefully you'll have other people with intellectual curiosity, and just the socialization skills you learn and the mistakes you make at that age that you can repair, and you can learn how to be a good person, how to make friendships, how to have long-term relationships. Those things you learn in college are invaluable. And so I always feel college should be the best time of your life, and where you grow up. And people who don't go through that experience, I think they're missing a lot. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I always recommend going to college, trying to find things that you like to learn. I mean, now it's so much better than when I went to school, where you have the internet and you can research any topic so easily. If you have that thirst for knowledge, I mean, it's right there at your fingertips like it's never been before. But more importantly still than that is the thing that I got out of school, and hopefully you did too, is I grew up there. And I got to really learn how to be with other people and how to have relationships. So that's what people are missing, and we see this in a lot of it. Sorry to cut you off because you're always about to speak, and I'm assuming you're going to agree with me. And we're seeing this in a lot of these young, let's say, internet kids who spent a lot of their time behind a computer, but didn't really learn how to socialize that much.
It's like you already knew what I was going to ask, and you just answered it.
Right. Yeah, because, again, I get emails, and I get asked this, I get bombarded with this, and, of course, I'm ready with this answer. I've had to answer for so many people. And I get, one of the things that, people should know is probably the most gratifying thing that has happened to me with this poker boom and being kind of a spokesman is the gratification I get from people coming up at every stop I go to, telling me that they took my advice and it was good advice, and that they stayed in school because of what I said. Because I get so many times people say, my parents want this, and I think they're wrong. And I'm telling them their parents are right. And not only that, there's value in appeasing your parents and making them happy. They were there for you. They raised you. You should really kind of go along with some of their wishes to some degree and, do it the right way so it works for you also. But stay in school, get your degree, have that, as we always say in poker, have those extra outs. If poker doesn't work out, for a number of reasons, it might not even be that it might be that you're successful financially, but there's more to success than financial success. It might not be fulfilling for you at some point. You'll have other avenues you can go down because you've got your education. You'll have other contacts that you made in school. There are just other things you can do. So I'm always proud of my son Joe, who got into poker, but Joey's got so much going for him, whether it's in media, whether it's in different things. Joey's going to be successful in whatever he goes into because he's well-rounded. He's a well-rounded person. That's how I raised him. So, regardless of whether he wins poker tournaments, I'm proud of my son, and the success I know he'll always achieve.
Yeah, I definitely agree that we really have to work on just being more well-rounded and, I guess, educating ourselves on different things besides poker. Because to me, one of the more frustrating things about hanging around a lot of poker players is you go to a party and like the only thing that people talk about is poker. There's like nothing else to talk about. It's kind of just everybody just has a one-track mind, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, and I've seen it even before the days of the internet, where people just play poker. I mean, they hardly knew any of the topics of the day in the news. Barely knew who the president of the United States was. They just didn't get educated in other ways. So it's not like this hasn't happened before. You get people who are like that, who can only do one thing. And I don't, as I said, I don't think that's healthy. I think it's better to be well-rounded. And this is something that's been, discussed for thousands of years. These are old Greek philosophies. Sound mind and body, and we have the Latin saying that translates to everything in moderation. So these principles and these discussions about what is the best way to be, go back as far as our recorded history. So it's nothing new. There's always going to be things you can obsess with. One thing that you hinted at in one of the questions you had asked me about some of the young players, and what do I see? And we have the big game right now, this Poker Stars thing that's real popular. And we see some of the young players off the internet that end up being pretty quiet. Actually, I've been pretty quiet on that show myself. But a lot of these kids haven't really developed social. Some of these shows have a social aspect to them. But it's very hard for someone who's learned to play poker behind a computer and isn't talking to anyone to now you stick him in a competitive environment like that and you expect him to be socializing because he's focusing on poker. And a guy that I want to bring up, he's a friend of mine, I like him a lot, is Amit Makia. Or maybe it's Makisha, I don't even know how to pronounce his last name. A real good player, and he was on the big game. His show didn't come up yet. We were playing online on one of these Poker Stars tournaments the other day, and he said, hey, put in a good word for me. I want to get on that show again. And I talked to some of the people doing the show because I was just curious how he did. Not how he did financially, but how he came off. And he was probably pieced out like a lot of the young guys were, so he was fighting real hard and probably played tighter than he normally does. And so for the viewer, he didn't really come across necessarily that well. He came across as a young kid with not a lot of personality, who's just playing solid poker, and that maybe wasn't that good for the viewers. I think one of the problems, and I'm going to talk to Mark is his name, he's the producer, Mark Mayer, and I think the people aren't being prepped well enough. I think we need to bring in some of these young kids the day before and tell them that we put them to be engaging, and that they should kind of prepare ahead of time of things they might want to say, things they might think will be interesting for the viewing public, things that they may want to say during a hand that might be funny, because having them come up with it on the spur of the moment isn't working, and it's too much to expect. And so you might think, well, that's pretty contrived to have people plan ahead of time. Actually, I used to do that when I was a live game player years ago. I used to have jokes that I might want to tell at a poker game, things that I think might be entertaining. So I used to think ahead of time and then do it. And it used to make me someone who people like to play with. That I did make the poker game fun. And some of the best, most noteworthy times I've had on some of these shows, if you think about it, were things like LOL documents, right? Obviously, that was contrived. I knew I was going to do it ahead of time, but it made a big splash. So there's nothing wrong with being prepared, and I think it'll make some of these shows better if we prepare some of these young people who haven't really combined poker and socializing in the way they learn to play poker.
Maybe they're just too sober.
No, well, one of the things I say, a lot of times people say I'm obviously too serious also when I'm playing poker, because I am. This is my work.
Right.
It's like I say to them, if you're, you're not goofing around when you're doing your work, it's on the center line or driving or whatever, that's when you're serious. So, a lot of times you don't combine socializing because you're deep in thought. People see me deep in thought while I'm in the middle of a poker hand. That's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about poker. I'm not thinking about being engaged.
Yeah, well, I should say maybe if you just liquor them up a little bit, they might get a little bit, funnier.
Yeah, well,
more
yeah,
smiling.
we'll have you produce the next big show, which will be Drunk Poker.
That sounds really fun.
Everyone will have to take, every time you either, I don't know, win or lose a hand, you have to take a shot or something.
Yeah. That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I won't be.
Or anytime somebody wins a pot with deuce of 7, everybody else has to take a shot or something like that. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I don't. As you know, I probably won't be playing. But it'd probably be a better show than what I'm putting on.
Yeah. But you don't drink anyways, right?
No, I'm not joking. I played poker my whole life, and it's usually seemed to work out for me to be sober. I have a funny story. I wasn't. Into drugs either when I was in college. But, I had, I'd smoked a joint before, but, I don't like smoking. That's not that good for either. There was a period where I had some marijuana brownies instead of smoking dope. I ended up giving that up also pretty quickly. But I played this one poker game where everyone said, hey, exactly what you were saying. Let's everyone get high and play poker. And so me and this other shrewd player, actually, as I recall, he's in my book. A lot of people know him. He's owned from Indiana, a professional player. And so we had this game of 8 people. Everyone kind of, well, I didn't agree, but everyone said, we're going to get stoned and play poker. And so Slinker and I said, well, I said, okay, we'll smoke with you, but we'll smoke after the poker game. If you guys want to smoke now, go ahead. So we played this poker game where 6 people got stoned, and these shrewd players, me and Slinker, we stayed sober. We get them. And, it's hard to believe we're the only 2 losers. I guess, I don't know if it was just bad luck or people got loosened up. You do find this sometimes, where people getting a little loosened up, maybe a drink or 2 play better poker than if they're not loosened up. Maybe a joint, we still have, Matt Stout has told me he didn't smoke a joint, he couldn't even play poker. So, if some people need to get loosened up a bit and make it better, I tend to think I was unlucky, but I ended up losing in that game.
And how did you end up doing in that game?
I think the 2 guys who didn't smoke were the only 2 losers, as I recall. So empirical study from one time. Maybe we did the wrong thing. I don't think so. I seem to recall I got pretty unlucky that people got their money in that and I lost, but whatever. That was the one. Yeah. I do remember that session.
That's really frustrating when you're like the only sober one and you expect to win, and then you end up losing. You're just what's the point of that? It's kind of disappointing, I think.
Yeah, well, you see this all the time where there's some drunk guy in the poker game who ends up taking all the money. Mm-hmm. Of course, you remember the times that happened where he was playing bad and got his money in. And sometimes he's really tough to play against. I had a thing at the World Series this year where Scotty Wynn was either drunk or acting drunk, and I didn't know which one. And, you don't know, is he crazy? Maybe a guy pretty tough to play with. If he's actually faking it a little bit, that's part of reading where he is. And we see that sometimes with drunk players. We're putting on that they're drunk more than they are. But we've also seen some people play drunk at the table. But, you and I talked earlier about some medicine thing where the trials of one don't always tell the story. Mm-hmm. I've made a lot of money off drunk people in my life. That's one, I'm not a drinker anyway, but it's one reason why I don't do shots at the table, even if that was something I would do. Which, and when I might have, I didn't take any recreational drugs. And it was part of the reason why I became a very sober person. It's not my nature anyway, I don't think. But I was a professional poker player, and I made a lot of money off of people who weren't sober when they were playing poker.
Yeah, I think I've probably made a decent amount too from drunk people. I think
Right,
it's
but
definitely your target, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm sure you also have the story of some drunk guy who's cleaning up. It happens.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of volatility in that play, and we tend to remember that scene more than we remember that the guy just gave away all his money.
Yeah, for sure. So, Barry, what else do you have in plan for the rest of the year? What tournaments are you playing?
Well, we're about to start in December, and the next tournament, December 3rd, is the Bellagio tournament. So I'm going to be playing that, and if I'm not mistaken, for me, I don't try. I think there are some things on the West Coast after that, or maybe even in Europe, but I have no plans to go to them. So I'll play December 3rd at Bellagio, and then after that, the next tournament I'll probably play is the PCA.
So PCA is January, right?
Yeah. It's like it starts somewhere in the first week of January. So I'll go out to the Bahamas. Obviously I'm a PokerStars representative, and the PCA has become the second biggest tournament series we have behind the World Series of Poker. And it's almost like the World Series of Poker is everyone's poker festival, and the PCA is the online players poker festival in a live setting. You have everyone who plays online trying to qualify for this stuff and coming and meeting up. So you get to see a lot of these people who you only knew by their screen name, and now you see them in the Bahamas. It's a pretty interesting tournament there. And it really draws a big field with one of the biggest prize pools of the year, probably the second biggest prize pool behind the main event of the World Series of Poker at the main event there. And they also have just an all-around tournament series. They have side games. It's become a really big thing to go to if you're a poker player. By the way, are you going to have a chance to make that?
I've gone a long time ago, but I didn't go to play the tournament. I went to I went with Hack and Z Dang and some friends, and I think that's where I might have met Raptor for the first time, some other people. But I just played the cash games there. It was like my first year playing poker. So it was a long time ago.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, I was talking to some people just yesterday at the Commerce. Them talk about, the tournaments, about whether they should go to the World Series of Poker or PCA or whatever. My first many years of going to the World Series of Poker was just for the cash games. I played the main event, maybe one other event, but this was my time to make money because you had a poker convention in town. Basically, you have a lot of poker players, and you may have potential of having a lot of juicy games. So even if you're not a tournament player, I would recommend going out to the Bahamas. The problem is it's expensive if you're land staying in those rooms. So the best ways you can do it. Or you might have to stay across the street. There's a hotel. There are other places that are different parts of the island, or there are a couple islands there where you may stay where it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg. No pun intended. But anyway, it's pretty expensive there at the Atlantis.
Yeah, it is. It really is. So in terms of your last chance for a redemption, is it the Five Diamond at the Bellagio coming up? Is that your last big tournament?
Yeah, that will be for this year, and I expect to bubble as I've been doing the whole year. I'll go out there, within one table of the money. And now it's gotten to the point where it's been pretty frustrating, where I do this thing where I do everything I can to gamble it up early to either get a hold of chips or get knocked out. It seems like no matter how I do that, when you get toward the money, I end up not having a lot of chips and on that one fateful hand. Hopefully it won't happen this time. We'll see. But it's been the story of my year.
Well, I wish you the best of luck, and hopefully this last one will be the one that turns everything around, but we'll see, I guess.
Right. But you said there's no chance of me seeing you, right?
No, I'm probably not going to get back on the West Coast until next year, early next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's too bad. Well, at least I get to see you on Skype, so that's something.
Yeah, it's like 45% good enough.
I don't know. There was the movie Encounters of the Third Kind. I don't think they had an encounter for seeing people on Skype. I don't know what kind that is.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's. I guess I'll just have to do with this for now.
Yeah. Well, it was really good talking to you, and definitely happy to catch up with you as always. You've always been such a good friend to me. Good luck in the tournament. I hope you don't end up bubbling again. I mean, that would suck. But yeah, hopefully it goes well.
Well, you almost have to expect that when you play tournaments. That's just the nature of them. There's going to be a lot of frustration, but I'm an optimist. I always think I'm going to do well. And even though I said it, I still expect to do well this tournament. And and I think I'm going to have a good year next year. So we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, Barry, I'll talk to you later. Thank you for being on the podcast and talking to all of us.
Okay, Thuy. Good seeing you.